Welcome to the Manifestation Method. I'm your host, Ayelet Polonsky, therapist, coach, and Jewish neo-shaman. Here we blend the wisdom of psychology, spirituality, and Kabbalah to empower you with tools for living your most authentic life, filled with love, abundance, and healing. Through somatic, narrative, and hypnotherapy, I've developed the manifestation method to guide your soul's transformation and the realization of your true self. Let's rise together. To dive deeper into manifesting your most authentic life, visit ayeletpolonsky.com. Welcome, everyone, to the Manifestation Method podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject that, trigger warning, could be a little bit triggering for some of us who are kind of feeling into this chaotic time period. We get into 2025 and boom, it's just like world events are just thrown in our faces. And for those of us who are affected directly or maybe just sensitized to others who have been affected, this conversation is going to be empowering and give you a direction and a way to hold the chaos. But we're going to be going a little bit into the chaos and talking about it. Also, just a heads up, this episode is not meant to be a therapy session. So if it does bring anything up in any of you, I recommend you take it and bring it to your therapist or whoever you go to help you work through all the big feelings. But that being said, today's topic is, I think, a really important one. We're going to be talking about alchemizing chaos into opportunity in 2025. I mean, I don't know about you, but 2024 for me was a huge reshuffling of my life. It felt pretty chaotic, although, and I'll share more in today's episode what I mean and what some of the direct experiences that I went through with my family this past year were. But then going into 2025, and it just feels like, oh my goodness, I thought we were going to be going into a calmer year, but no, I was wrong, right? We have like the energy of 2025 is accelerating. The pace of change is rapid, and it's really becoming impossible to ignore the deeper shifts that are happening within and around us. And in just the first few days of the new year, we've already seen world events that shake the illusion of safety and force us to confront what we've been avoiding, right? Look at the fires that happened in LA, and, we're still dealing with the war in the Middle East. And if we think that things are just going to calm down, I mean, I think just according to some mystic sources and spiritual sources, I just think that this energy is meant to be intensifying because Source kind of has to be shaking stuff up in order for us to really be able to digest and learn the lessons that we're meant to be learning now, so that we can come out the other side as a more evolved nation, of more evolved people, right? So this isn't something to fear, right? I just want to clarify. This is not necessarily something to fear. This is the call to evolution, right? This is an invitation to step into the next level of our expansion, to navigate the storm, not from a place of survival, but from a place of self-mastery. So the question becomes, how do we transmute chaos into clarity? Right? How do we take this intense energy and use it as fuel for transformation instead of letting it overwhelm us? So let's get into it.
Yeah, and I think too, like, this is like the opportunity of this time for me has really been to just see see my old patterns and how even like responding to things differently. I feel like ever since 2022, time has really picked up, and the illusions of safety and these systems that are supposed to keep us safe, quote unquote, are just completely falling away. And one thing that I just even thought about as what you were saying right now is we can't even have these old patterns of why me anymore, or just going into victim mentality like right away. Like I think, it's so natural when disaster strikes and change comes sweeping into our lives to go to that place first and really process, why is this happening? Why me? Like, why do I have to change? And I'm not saying for anyone to bypass their feelings of distress or grief, but really it's almost like the universe is challenging us to not even go to that place anymore, and like just kind of go into like have our grief, process our grief, but go straight into being open for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, a mantra, just based on what you were just saying, that comes to mind, that I really, really try to embody when life gets shaken up for me, is that life isn't happening to me, rather, it's happening for me, right? Because the life happening to me paradigm really puts us into the victim seat, and then we're powerless. Then there's no way of taking responsibility, which is the ability to respond to what life is throwing at us. But when we start to see that life is happening for me, then we see every single freaking thing that happens as a possibility, as an opportunity. And like to the whole point of this illusion of safety dissolving now more than ever. For a long time, many of us have really built our sense of stability around external structures, right? Certain systems, certain religions, certain relationships, communities, beliefs, even governments that, we assumed would always be there for us and have our back. But this year, this illusion of safety is lifting, or it's shifting. And what we're seeing more and more is that there are systems that are breaking down that are no longer serving the collective evolution. We're seeing old paradigms collapsing, whether it's the old paradigm of how relationships used to look in our parents' generation, our grandparents, grandparents' generations. Relationships were totally different. That's an old paradigm of relationships, right? Careers are changing, especially ever since COVID, right? There
Right.
was like the pre-COVID norm of what a career looked like, and then the post-COVID norm of like, okay, I can wear pajama pants and go to
We're
my
not
meeting.
going back to the office.
We're
Yeah.
not going back to the office, right?
Yeah.
And also just society at large is just taking a massive alchemical transformation, and we're seeing a lot of that. And another thing is that there's what I experience as like an energetic quickening, right?
Yes.
Manifestations are happening faster. And anything that is not aligned with my truth is being stripped away, whether it's
Hmm.
friendships, whether it's certain dynamics within my friendships, jobs, careers, right? Things that are not in my highest good, not in alignment with
Hmm.
my soul's purpose, are starting to like, boom, mirror in my face, like red signals, get out, change something, transform. And again, I want to remind you, and I will probably say this numerous times in this episode, that this is not a punishment, right? This is a mass awakening. The world isn't getting more chaotic. The chaos was always there. I think about, my ancestors, my great grandparents, and they'd had to like flee their countries. And so it's not necessarily this paradigm of like things are more chaotic, but I is with the widespread of information and social media, and it's just becoming more visible. So it feels like there's more and that it's faster. And so from our paradigm, it is more, it is faster, it is more intense because it's that visibility that allows us to choose something different. So it's like the lessons that we are being afforded right now in our generation because of the access we have to what's happening on a global scale, right?
Hmm.
That's causing real alchemy internally. And I think what causes us to stay stuck in past or old paradigms is when we resist the fact that things are changing rapidly, right? Because the more we resist that change, the more turbulent this process feels. But if we can lean into this energy, this cosmic chaos, right? If we can lean into it, the more we can then use it as a catalyst for our highest expansion, I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And something also that you said that really struck out to me right now is just like how things are right, like because there's this insane amount of it's like quickening in the world, even like thinking about how in physics literally gravity and mass are getting lighter, which is mind-boggling because gravity is like, for in science it's like gravity is the one thing that's holding this whole thing together. So just even thinking about it getting lighter is like such, it's like mental gymnastics trying to even understand that concept. But
Mhm.
I think too, we're seeing a lot of manifestations happening at a rapid pace. But then I also see when like people going like the highs are highs and the lows are really low. So how can we best during this time use this energy and alchemize it, like use this chaotic energy and alchemize it into opportunity energy?
Yeah, great question. I would say that the best way to experience the greatest form of alchemy and transformation and to actually come out the other end of this pressure cooker, seeing the good that comes out of it and experiencing even more abundance and growth is, my advice would be to answer the call to change, right? Versus, let's say, being forced to change. So, what does this mean in real time? I see it as like our intuition or that still small voice, that godly voice inside each and every one of us. And we all have like that little internal God particle inside that's whispering to us at all moments. That's like our internal navigation system, right? That's saying, go this way, go that way, do this, do that. And the universe or that, God particle, that voice always starts with a whisper. And if we don't listen, the whispers will turn into nudges. And if we still don't listen, then life will shake us awake. Okay, so there are two ways to move through transformation. The first is willingly, right? By listening to the signs, by honoring the nudges, and by taking aligned action, right? So it could even just mean developing a practice of listening to your intuition, which you can really do by just meditating for a few minutes every single day. Just get quiet, listen to the nudges of your body, right? There's a whole art form to establishing or deepening one's intuition. But for now, for this episode's sake, right, understanding that the first way to move through transformation is willingly by listening, and the other way to move through transformation is by force, right? It's when life has to actually break things down to make us move. We saw this with COVID, right? And I personally, looking on a global scale, I think a lot of people who call themselves light workers or healers or, awakened beings, I think they really internalized and embodied a lot of the lessons that COVID was here to teach us. And there were tons of lessons. But I think for the majority of the world, I don't know that I could say we've learned our lesson, right? I don't,
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? I think once,
totally.
right? It's like, and so the next cosmic earthquake had to happen to like shake us up again, to wake us up again, right? And then we saw like October 7th and what happened in the Middle East, and that had this like huge ripple effect
Hmm.
throughout the entire world. And did that bring us closer together as a people? I don't know. I don't know. I hope so. Then we look at like the political situation this last year, a couple
Yeah.
years in America, right? Did that? No, that I feel like that divided us even more. It was like two
Mhm.
sides that are constantly arguing about the other and who's right and who's wrong. And it's like, when are we going to realize that this whole game is about us annihilating ourselves into source, into God, right? Really. And what do I mean by that? Because annihilation is a scary word. What I mean is, it's interesting because we moved back to America right before these last elections,
Hmm.
me, my husband, and my kids. And so we kind of got thrown into this like political divide. And this whole time, I think it was a blessing and a curse for me that I was able to kind of stay a little bit more open minded to hearing both sides of the debate. And it allowed me to kind of zoom up and above both both parties, and I'm in many different like eclectic circles with different types of people,
Totally.
so right, so I definitely heard both sides of the debate, and I have very passionate people in my life who are both trying to like pull me in either direction.
Hmm.
And every time that would happen, I would feel myself, the internal chaos of like, what's right, what's true, what's wrong, who's telling the truth, because they're both saying the same thing about the other side,
Hmm.
right? And so I would have to kind of like energetically hover above like the yin and the yang. I'd have to hover above the right and the wrong and see things from a God perspective, like annihilate myself into the knowing that whatever ends up happening, God is the ultimate, you know, political decider, I guess you could say, right? Like the one who's making all the big time decisions. And if something is not working out in our favor, it's because we're still not really learning that lesson. And so we have to be forced into it, you know, and then we see like the fires in LA, like another chaotic, whew, right? And so when we think about, you know, a relationship where deep down you know that something isn't right, you know, use that as an example. You know, maybe you feel it in your body. Maybe there's some subtle tension, little intuitive hits, you know, but you push it down because it's uncomfortable, because it's comfortable,
Hmm.
right? And you tell yourself, it's fine, I can tolerate this. But then the whispers don't stop, right? This is like the difference between answering the call willingly versus by force,
Right.
right? Then one day
Change
what
or be
happens?
changed.
Change or be changed. And
Hmm.
so, like this relationship, deep down, you know something's not right. You might feel something in your body giving you these little intuitive hits, right? But
Hmm.
you push it down because the relationship is comfortable. And then and you also again you think like, oh well, this is familiar so I can tolerate this. And then one day something happens, right? A big betrayal, a massive argument, an abrupt ending that forces you to face what you've been avoiding this whole time, right?
Hmm.
That is life making the decision for you because you weren't making it yourself, which means you weren't taking responsibility. Again, responsibility is the ability to respond to those intuitive nudges,
Right.
right? And the same applies to career, health, finances, spiritual growth.
Hmm.
The universe is always guiding us towards expansion. And if we resist it, it removes what no longer serves us, and often in ways that feel painful, but are actually divine intervention. So, the lesson here, just to sum it all up, because I said a lot, right? Move before you're forced to move and listen while the whispers are still soft and gentle,
Hmm.
and take aligned action when the door is still open before it gets slammed shut and forces you into action.
Yeah, I think something that's been really coming up, and even just hearing my friend group talk about things that they're going through right now, is this idea of knowing when to take aligned action or like stepping out of procrastination and self-sabotage and into aligned action. And I think that that's really a key word in what you're saying is sometimes when these events are really scary that are happening in the world, and it can really like disable us and put us into freeze, you know, like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It's like really like freeze and fawn. Like we want to survive on a certain level. We don't want to shake things up in our life. So we either try to appease the situation and people please and just, you know, make everything okay and like keep things calm, or we just completely freeze. And you might find yourself scrolling endlessly on Instagram or TikTok, or knowing that you need to take action in something, but then like just numbing out or whatever, not doing it and pushing it under the rug. But I really think something that's super important with what you're saying is leaning into the pressure and taking the aligned action to expand the vessel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like I'll give an example of, I'll give it a personal example, and this might even be like the first time I'm actually speaking about this live on the pod. Many of you might not know that for 8 years, I was living with my husband and my kids in Israel. And then October 7th happened. But let's rewind, about a year or so, maybe a little more, before October 7th happened. I would have these like intuitive nudges, these intuitive hits that would tell me, maybe you're meant to live for a certain amount of time in America with your family, right? Like Israel is a beautiful country, and obviously it goes without saying there's so much magic to living in the Holy Land. And it's also, Israel is a tense place to be, especially for someone like me who my system is energetic, which means I'm extra attuned to my environment. And so being in a place where there is just constant war happening, or we're under the threat of, whatever, there's a lot of, you're under threat a lot in Israel. That would put me under the pressure cooker. And, for a while, I kept telling my husband, I think maybe, and I think maybe we're meant to take the kids and go to America for some time, especially while the kids are young. We'll go live near, any of the grandparents, have the help. That way we can really like rise in our purpose and our mission. We'll have the support rather than just feel like we're kind of like just getting by. And we did not listen. We did not listen to that voice for numerous reasons, like uplifting our whole family and a whole years of life and community that we established for ourselves there. It was not an easy decision this way or that to get up and leave. But then once October 7th happened, it was like I felt like we were forced out,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like I felt like I had no choice. I mean, there's
Yeah.
always a choice, but in that moment, it was just like I acted by force.
Yeah.
It was like I just felt like I remember there was one night my son was 4 at the time, and it was 2 nights after the war broke out, and he wakes up at the middle of the night shaking,
Mm-hmm.
and crying. And I come to his room, and he looks at me and he goes, "Mommy, mommy, will you protect me? Will you keep me safe?"
Mm-hmm.
Whew, this is just 2 days after the war broke out. I didn't even know that I could keep myself safe, let alone trying to put on an act in front of my little kids, and I'm waking them up from their naps and running to bomb shelters. Um, of course I looked at him and I said, "Mommy's always going to keep you safe."
Yeah.
And I walked out of his room crying, looking at my husband, and I said to him, looking him dead in the eyes, I said, "We're going to come right back to Israel as soon as we can, but we need to get out of here."
Yeah.
And, we just booked the first flight out that we could find. And thank God our kids are young enough to get away with that, where they didn't have like adult relationships established yet. Both my husband and I are entrepreneurs. We work from home. We can work anywhere in the world. We thought we were going to America for a couple weeks just to for things to quiet down. Things still have not quieted down. It's been over a
Yeah.
year. Next thing you know, we're living here in America. I mean, we've established a whole community here. We have events and gatherings and sacred ceremonies in our home. And like this whole time, looking back in hindsight, right? If I were to have listened to that intuitive nudge willingly, then it could have probably prevented a real traumatic type of exodus from Israel. The way we left Israel was
Yeah.
really traumatizing for my family.
Mm-hmm.
We could have prevented that, but it's no, we were in a way forced, in air quotes, forced out. And now in hindsight, looking back, it's very clear to me that we were so meant to be here for right now that our work can be done in the way that it's been done here, in a way that it just could not be done there. And it's just brought my family closer together, brought my kids closer to their grandparents. So much good has come out of this move for us that
Mm-hmm.
this whole time it was really divine guidance nudging me saying, yeah, you're right, you are meant to be there, but it's going to take something catastrophic for you to listen. So
Right.
sometimes that's just going to be the case. We just have to learn the lesson by force, but if we can do things willingly, I find that the backlash is not as traumatic.
Yeah, and how like we talk a lot about too, like expanding our vessel in manifestation work, especially Kabbalistic manifestation, which is what manifestation method is sourced in. Kabbalah, psychology, quantum physics, all of that. And how do we know, like there's like the abstract understanding of like, okay, we create vessels, like we create these containers to hold the manifestation, or like the light of the creator that's coming down that wants to be received and materialized in the physical realm. But when these like when these intense experiences happen, how do we not first of all like break the vessel, right, and have like this, like when light overspills or when vessels break, that's the chaotic energy that we can feel sometimes. How do we consciously grow our vessel during these time periods or time periods of great pressure in our lives in order to receive greater manifestation without totally losing our heads and sanity?
Yeah, so whew, that's a good question. Big one. Okay, so I think we start with understanding the difference between expansion versus stress, right? Because some people might feel stressed out all the time and confuse that with expansion. And some people might actually be going through a vessel expansion that's meant to catapult them and quantum leap them to the next version of who they're meant to be, like from caterpillar to butterfly type of experience, but they might collapse into stress, right? And it's very confusing. There's a fine line because when our vessel is expanding, similar to a caterpillar, cocooning and going through a dark chrysalis phase in order to come out a butterfly, there's a lot of pressure in that cocoon. There's a lot of pressure that olives have to go through to become olive oil. There's a lot of pressure that grapes have to go through to become wine. Okay, so expansion often feels like pressure, and so does stress, right? So the key is about learning to differentiate between the two. So I think that's a really good compass to start with. So I'd say that expansion feels intense but exciting. Okay, so expansion feels intense but exciting. So there's even a feeling of possibility that comes with expansion, even if it's uncomfortable. Okay, while stress can feel chaotic and draining. Okay, so stress can often lead to spiraling thoughts, to overwhelm, to exhaustion, to decision fatigue, to total, dissociation or freeze, like I'm not going to be doing anything because I'm too stressed out. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like expansion is calling us forward. There's this like inner knowing that there's something possible coming out on the other end. Like I remember when we left Israel after October 7th and we were on the airplane and I was looking down at Israel from a bird's eye view and I just had that feeling of like longing in my heart to like, oh, like I wanted to go back to Israel, but there was this little still small voice in me that was just like, I don't know that we're coming back. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that we're coming back. And that whole time, it took 5 months of internal turbulence for me to come to that decision of like, where do we belong? Where are we meant to go? But there was
Mm-hmm.
this underlying knowing that it was an expansion, like a
Yeah.
real vessel expansion, because I kept telling my husband, right, that I don't know why this is, and I think I even told you also, right? Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why this is happening, but I know that it's good. Like, I
Yeah.
know that good is going to come out of it. And while I
Mm-hmm.
can't even, the amount of expansion that my family, my husband and I have experienced personally and have created for ourselves, for our community, for the people who we serve, we've never experienced this much expansion in our lives, like what we've experienced in this 1 year. So, I think a question you can ask yourself to be able to differentiate expansion versus stress are, am I feeling stretched towards something greater? That would be expansion. Or am I feeling trapped or stuck? Because that
Mm-hmm.
would be stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? Does this discomfort feel like fear of the unknown, or is it resistance to something that's misaligned for me?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there's a fine line, and so a great metaphor is like a snake shedding its skin, right? It's tight, it's itchy, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And if the snake resists shedding, it will literally die inside of its old skin. How crazy is that?
Wow, that is so crazy. What a metaphor.
What a metaphor. Like it's
Yeah.
crazy. Like we literally, and it's like sometimes some of us are like The Walking Dead, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So some of
You
us are
can really
like,
be like that in life for years even. I know people who get in these ruts and it's like the rut is caused by this resistance to change.
totally, totally. And but if we allow the process, it emerges renewed. So
Mm-hmm.
you are shedding what no longer fits. And so also don't mistake the discomfort of transformation for something going wrong. That's
Mm-hmm.
a big one. Don't confuse discomfort of evolving to a new version of yourself as, oh my gosh, there's a problem, there's something going wrong, I need to do something about it. It's actually a sign that you're on the right track.
Wow.
Right? And so what actually blocks expansion? This is important. Okay? Because so many people think that the biggest expansion, the biggest enemy or block to expanding into the next butterfly version of you is fear. People confuse this to be fear as like the biggest block, but really it's avoidance. Avoidance is the biggest enemy of expansion. And, when I say avoidance, I mean it could be like procrastination, resistance, freeze, not doing, not taking aligned action. And we procrastinate when we know that we need to change, but are afraid of what that change will require. So, some common blocks to expansion could be overthinking and waiting for perfect clarity, right? Like we all do that. We overthink and wait for like the right moment, the right amount of education, the right amount of diplomas on my wall in order for me to take the leap. Right? That is a block. That is avoiding responsibility. Another common block to expansion is fear of making the wrong move, right? So in this
Wow.
case,
Or afraid of disappointing, others.
or if exactly that's a big
Yeah.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
afraid of just that's a big one. Afraid of disappointing others for sure. And that's a lot of there has to be a lot of kind of like social deconditioning
Mm-hmm.
there to help us like elevate to that next rung on our evolution. Yeah. And another common block to expansion would be emotional overwhelm that leads to freezing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like our whole system can actually shut down because it's just too overwhelming. I can't handle the stress. I can't handle the anxiety. So I'm just going to freeze and do nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which there are ways to navigate this. Like I love somatic experiencing as a healing modality because it
Mm-hmm.
just helps me attune to the really nuanced places in my body that are feeling contraction or stress or anxiety, and I can create space within that contraction,
Yeah.
right? And that can help me then build some momentum and take action again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another common block to expansion is staying in old patterns because they feel familiar,
Yes.
right? That's a big one. And I think it's just really important here, if for those of you who are listening who are like, I'm ready to evolve, I'm ready to expand, I'm ready to manifest, and I want the abundance, and I want the life partner, and I want the money or the health or whatever, right? Clarity does not come before movement.
Mm-hmm.
Clarity comes as a result of movement.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. So I really encourage expansion through aligned action. Instead of waiting to feel ready, ask yourself, what is the smallest, most aligned step that I can take today? Baby steps, kitten steps. Baby steps are too big. Kitten steps. Right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the smallest, most aligned action that I can take today?
Mm-hmm.
Also asking yourself, where am I being guided and how can I lean in instead of resist?
Mm-hmm.
And then the last one, which is something I am in constant relationship with, is how can I regulate my nervous system so that expansion feels safe? Whew,
Hmm. Hmm.
that even just saying that like just gives me tingles, right?
Yeah.
Because let's be real, growth doesn't feel safe to our nervous system, at least not at first. The mind loves what's known, it loves what's familiar. Even if the known is painful, it loves what's familiar, and we will stay in a familiar hell versus dive into an unfamiliar heaven, right? And so the way to move forward without panic is through self regulation, through
Hmm.
somatic grounding work. Move your body, breathe deep, release tension, journal, do the subconscious rewiring by journaling, and ask yourself the question in your journal today: what am I actually afraid of? Get clear, right? And then take micro actions. Small wins signal to your brain that change is safe, right? So if I have to leave you guys with a mantra for how to navigate or alchemize chaos into opportunity this year, is I don't need to be ready, I just need to begin.
So good.
Yeah, big one, big topic, a big topic. I hope it met everyone exactly where it needed to meet them, and that I didn't shake up, I didn't cause more chaos than already is in existence.
Lots of tools you shared. And I think also just a huge takeaway was what you said about having responsibility, like taking responsibility, growing your vessel by taking responsibility. Like, I think sometimes responsibility, when we first hear it, can sound like, I don't know, like oh, like it's all up to me, like I have to be the one to do it. But really, responsibility is just cultivating the ability to respond, right?
To the moment, right
Yeah,
here,
to the
right now,
moment.
in
Hmm.
this present moment. And I think that's a big, important piece because people
Hmm.
think responsibility and then they start to think like 6 months, a year, down the line. And
Yeah, like
but
you're planning it out, you're trying, but the thing is like with this dance, especially the dance with manifestation work, is you're really learning how to, um, like learn how to respond in a new way, which is like this dance with the cosmos and with your higher power of moment to moment responding, so that you're letting the process you to turn yourself into like a better version of yourself, your most highest, most aligned version of yourself, versus like trying to contort ourselves into some image that we have that might not, that's not even like, we can't even conceive our own greatness a lot of the time. And when we learn the co-creative dance and letting ourselves process like the work in that space versus trying to force it is huge.
yeah, yeah. And also just trusting that you don't need to know whether or not you're going to be able to handle what comes in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now, because when you're doing this work, your vessel is in a constant state of expansion. So who you will be in 6 months, God willing, is not who you are today. So what you think today you cannot handle or be responsible for in 6 months, you might actually surprise yourself when you just focus on the present moment and lean into the ability to respond to this moment. Can I step in and lean in to what is right now and trust that in the future, by doing these little micro moments of leaning in with responsibility, my vessel is in a constant state of energetic expansion that will allow me in a year from now, 5 years, to be able to hold more responsibility, right? I'm like living proof of that. Like I'm always in this state of expanding and filling my vessel with more people I'm responsible for, events, communities, you name it, right? And if I were to future trip and get into that whole spiral of like, oh my gosh, I'm just creating a project now, but if it grows, then in a year from now, 5 years from now, it's going to get that big. Can I handle it? No. Can I handle 5 people today? Can I handle 10 people today? Okay. And if it turns into 100 people in a year, it's because I did the inner work for my vessel to expand, to be able to hold that, right?
Amazing. So Ayala, take us through a little visualization that we've made for the folks in the change in the hurricane.
Okay. All right. Cool. Let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So for those of you who are not operating a heavy vehicle, meaning you're not driving, I recommend that you drop in a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. And if you can't get to the visualization now, pause it, come to it later, because I think it'll be really helpful if you're in a process of navigating some chaotic times. Okay, go ahead and close your eyes and take a deep breath in. Good. Let's do that again. Relax your shoulders. Deep breath in through the nose. Exhale out through the mouth. Beautiful. Now imagine yourself standing in the middle of a powerful storm. The winds are howling. The sky is dark. Everything around you is shifting, breaking apart, rearranging itself. Really see it. But instead of resisting, you step into the center of it, into the eye of the storm. See yourself stepping into the middle, the eye of the storm. Here in the center, everything is calm, still, grounded. Here you are not at the mercy of the storm. You are the one holding space within it. As you breathe, feel your energy expanding, not shrinking, not contracting, but growing, expanding. Feel yourself getting bigger, more spacious. Feel how your nervous system relaxes as you realize that the chaos outside does not dictate your inner state. Feel into the knowing that you are a steady force, grounded in your truth. And as you take up space in the eye of the storm, you are expanding, not breaking. And now, as the storm swirls around you, you take a step forward. Instead of waiting for things to calm down, you move with the energy, allowing it to propel you forward, using it as momentum. Feel your body growing even stronger, even steadier, more open, more expansive. And go ahead and take a deep breath in. And as you exhale, whisper to yourself, I am the calm in the chaos. I am expanding with ease. I am stepping into my highest timeline. And feel whatever's shifting inside of you, alchemizing, upgrading as you download these new codes for expansion and growth. Beautiful. Let's take one more deep breath in. And deep breath out, allowing these energies to ground, stabilize, and anchor into your being, trusting, knowing, believing that new information has been written, in your electromagnetic field, in your cells, that you can move forward with grace, knowing that you can handle any obstacle the universe presents you with. And when you're ready, you can gently, slowly open your eyes, knowing that you carry this stillness within you, no matter what unfolds in the world around you. And before we end, just one final thought. 2025, I really feel that it's not about playing small. It's not about waiting for stability to return. It's about becoming a stable force within yourself. It's about moving with the current, with the shifts, and using them as fuel and stepping into the new evolution of who you're meant to be. So, blessing you all to really be able to step into this next version of yourself with so much grace. Thanks for listening. Thank you for joining me on the Manifestation Method. I hope today's episode has inspired you on your journey to authenticity and abundance. Remember, your transformation begins with your mindset. If you're ready to take the next step, visit ayeletpolonsky.com for more resources and guidance. Until next time, here's to your rising.